We acknowledge, honor, and respect that many of us are located on the traditional unceded territories of many Indigenous peoples of Canada. Welcome to another episode of Veg Networking Canada, where vegan plant-based companies connect and collaborate. We're super excited today. We have a special guest with a depth of food industry experience, running her family's Japanese restaurants, scaling to $3 million in revenue. She has excellent enterprise sales skills as an early team member of Vancouver's iconic social media management software company, Hootsuite. She is a public speaker, a 2021 recipient of the Vegan Women's Summit Rising Stars Disruptors Award, and a 2021 recipient of the BC Food and Beverage Rising Star Award. Veg Networking Canada is pleased to introduce the founder and CEO of Save to See Foods, Aki Kaltenbach. Welcome, Aki.
Thank you. What a nice welcome.
We're so happy to have you here today, and we're thrilled to hear more about our first question for you, which is, what is your vegan plant-based origin story?
Yeah, so my entry into the plant-based lifestyle that I lead to today was a book, actually, and it was a book called How Not to Die. And I remember I had bought it from my aunt, who is very health conscious and, always looking for ways to, extend her life. And so I had bought it for her, but then ended up reading it myself. And I'd watched, my fair share of documentaries around, the ills of animal agriculture and so on and so forth. But for whatever reason, that book kind of was the tipping point that finally convinced me to go plant-based. And it was just the way it was, structured was, it was basically listed the top 20 killers in the US, and how eating a plant-based diet could either reverse or cure most of these killers. And so after that, I was fully converted.
And that's the book by Dr. Greger, right?
Yes. Yeah. Sorry. But I like to, even though health was the main motivation for me, it has become so much broader than that, and that was back in 2018. And now, as I dive deeper and my business is connected to it and my personal life is connected to it, the environment, the animal welfare, I mean, all of it is, you can't just, it's not just because of health now, it's all of the above.
Yeah, and that's the important part of the movement and our group is a judgment-free zone. It's almost like a lot of folks have that same sentiment. They kind of break the matrix. They come in through health, and then all of a sudden they're opened up to animal and the environment. And it's like, yes, reinforcement of good, positive decisions. So that resonates for sure. So switching gears from your personal story into your business story, can you tell us more about your entrepreneurial spirit, your spark, where that started? Was it with the family business? Was it before that?
Yeah, so my family is full of entrepreneurs, mainly restaurants. So my mom and dad had a restaurant all my life. My aunt and uncle had restaurants, of which I worked in previous to starting Save the Sea, the Japanese restaurants you mentioned. So I ran those Japanese restaurants for 5 years. And that was where I came up with the idea for Save the Sea. I had become vegan. Obviously, we served a lot of sushi there, and I was looking for plant-based alternatives, and there were none. And so I started developing my own recipes. But it was, you asked about my entrepreneurship story. I had always wanted to, even though Save the Sea was my first business, I had wanted to be an entrepreneur for many years, but I just never knew what that could be, right? I didn't even know what that thing could be. And so it was so interesting how it sort of fell into my lap in a way, because it was only then that I understood, when there were no plant-based seafood alternatives available, that I was like, this is a ginormous opportunity. How is nobody doing this? And yeah, started me on my path, my entrepreneurial path.
Brilliant, brilliant. So our next question is, what are some trends in your industry? But maybe before answering that, why don't you tell everybody who's going to be listening to this more about your industry? And you kind of alluded to it there. You're ahead of the curve, sort of like paving the way in terms of plant-based, we think, real seafood. So why don't you share a little bit more about your industry, and then what are some trends within that industry?
Yeah, so plant-based seafood is and still today very nascent, although I just came back from Expo West, one of the biggest food and beverage trade shows in the world. And there were, more plant-based seafood companies than when I started Save the Sea, that's for sure. But in saying that, it's still very nascent. And I think this statistic really encapsulates it. So plant-based meat makes up just over 1% of the entire retail meat industry. So it's 1.4 billion, a 1.4 billion dollar market, plant-based industry, plant-based meat industry. Plant-based seafood makes up 1% of the plant-based meat industry. So sales in 2020 were $12 million USD. So that just goes to show you how early we are in plant-based seafood and how much opportunity there is to be had. It's predicted that plant-based seafood will be a $1.3 billion industry within the next decade. So that's a little bit about the industry. I mean, in terms of some trends in the industries, other than being, I see so many articles, 2022 is the year of plant-based seafood. So other than it's so hot right now, there are three categories of alternative seafood. So there's the first category is plant-based proteins, and that's the category that Save the Sea plays in. And other brands that your listeners may be familiar with are Good Catch, that they're probably the biggest in the industry. Sophie's Kitchen, who've been around for a long time. So they're making seafood analogs from plants, whether it's konjac or chickpea or a legume blend. The second category is fermentation. So this is like your brands like corn. Corn's been around for 20 years or something, but there are now other companies coming on doing the similar type of fermentation. And then the third category is cultivated. I'm sure everybody's heard of, lab grown seafood. And so that you're seeing a lot of companies emerge in this space as well, like wild type or finless foods. So I just mentioned this because there are trends that are happening, in each of these that are specific. So I very much live in the plant-based protein world. I really can't even speak to cultivated meat and seafood other than, who some of the players are, but I have no idea how they do what they do. So when it comes to plant-based protein specifically, one trend for sure is, and this is the space that, or the way we differentiate ourselves, is clean label, right? So I'm sure many of you have heard the complaints around companies like Beyond and Impossible that are highly processed, high in sodium. And so I love a Beyond burger more than anyone, and I consume my fair share, but this is not something you can eat every day. It's junk food, essentially. So our Save the Sea, the way we differentiate ourselves is we are minimally processed and made from wholesome ingredients. Our plant-based smoked salmon is made from carrots, and our tuna salad is made from jackfruit, of course, and a few other things.
Wow. Okay. Well, be careful, folks, if you get addicted to Save the Sea foods, because you can eat it every day. It's healthy. So thank you so much for that high-level overview of the three different categories within plant-based seafood. I think that's really eye-opening, and you're spot on. Like, there's probably 5 or 6 trends within each one of those. So I can appreciate you sort of staying in that plant-based protein lane and sharing more about that. Thank you so much. So you mentioned that you were just at Expo West. Your business is growing. Our next question for you is, where is Save the Sea Foods going in the future?
Yeah, so we are currently available across Canada in natural retail. And so that means Whole Foods, it means Choices, it means Healthy Planet. You are not able to yet find us in Metro, Loblaws, Sobeys, Walmart, Costco. And that is just because, again, we are, when you see our product on shelf, we live in the refrigerated plant-based protein section. We're a refrigerated product. So fresh, so, short shelf life. And we're often the only plant-based seafood product on the shelf. So, there's a lot of education that needs to happen before we can move to conventional grocery stores where the customers aren't maybe looking, as progressive, but also as passionate about plant-based, right? So it makes sense to start where your audience is looking for these things and looking to try new things and is more of an early adopter.
Beautiful.
So in terms of where we're going in the future, so Canada is still, I guess my point is we're in, I don't know, just over 200 retailers across the country. So we've just scratched the surface, even in Canada, even though we've been in market, just under 2 years. So still a lot of room for growth in Canada in some of these more conventional retailers. But then, yes, the US is our next market. It's just so big. And so the volumes you can do there are just, in terms of shipping and logistics, as you can imagine, because we're a fresh product, we can't make our product and then put it in a warehouse and store it for a year. We are making it, to order essentially. And so shipping costs are a huge part of our cost of goods sold. And so by accessing markets that have a higher population, it allows us to offer a product that, at a price that people are willing to pay. So entering the US market is a big one for us. And, so at Expo West, it was definitely, meeting retailers, brokers, distributors, all the folks you need to get on board to make it possible. We are aiming to be there by the end of Q3, early Q4, but still TBD of when that will be and where that will be as well. The plan as of today will be a regional launch. The US is ginormous, so to do a national launch is probably not possible for a startup like us. So we will launch regionally, and that may be the West Coast, that may be the East Coast, still TBD. And then the other big piece that we want to get after, and this is not in the next 12 months, but year 2 and 3 is food service. So I come from a food service background, and actually when I first launched Save the Sea, our go-to-market strategy was food service because it's what I knew. That's where my networks lie. I had deep connections with the distributors that service food service, like GFS and Cisco and those types of folks. And then COVID hit. And so and all restaurants shut down for the next however many months. And so we had to pivot. And that is why we ended up going into retail when we did, because that was the only market that was open to us. So in saying that, we had put food service on the back burner just because it was one of the hardest hit industries by COVID. And so to sell into this channel was hugely challenging, but you can already feel it's coming back. And so I am very bullish on food service. And last year we did this incredible collaboration with Copper Branch. Copper Branch is Canada's largest plant-based fast food chain. They have 42 locations across the country. And we did a branded Save the Sea Poke Bowl with them that launched on World Ocean Day. And so looking to do something similar with them again this year, and maybe some of their other restaurant banners. So yeah, food service is another big, hairy, audacious goal of ours to access.
Well, Aki, this is exactly why we have Veg Network in Canada. We just absolutely love talking to founders who have big, hairy, audacious goals. I think the BHAGs are, they're the best. That's what everybody wants to hear about. And so, folks, Canada domination is in the plans in the most compassionate way possible, and then regional push into the US, and then of course food service as well. And for anybody who is in food service and is curious, make sure that you do connect with Aki. Thank you so much for sharing more about your roadmap. It's exciting to see where you're going. Our next question is always prefaced by saying there's no right or wrong answers. Maybe it's something you've done, currently doing, maybe something in the pipe. But the next question is, does Save the Seafood support any charitable organizations?
Yeah, so we're a startup, and it's not so much about capital as it is we're still finding our voice and what we stand for. We have our mission, and it's broad and audacious, to create a world where we no longer need to kill fish to enjoy seafood, but still haven't dialed in what our, impact piece will be. But what I can say is that we are signing on with 1% for the planet, and that will at the very least allow us to work towards creating these relationships with, the many organizations that are out there that are, helping our oceans recover from everything we've done to them.
Absolutely. 1% for the planet is so great. And for those listening, Catherine Paul Watson, anybody from Sea Shepherd, that's a natural fit, and getting these carrot locks on the boats would be incredible. But we digress. Next one is related around tools or pieces of information that have helped you as an entrepreneur, whether it was when you were running the restaurants or where you're at now. And the next question is, do you have any recommendations as it relates to books, podcasts, or apps that you would like to share?
Yeah, so I have a lot of resources that are very specific to consumer packaged goods. So prior to starting Save the Sea, I never worked in this industry. I worked in software, I worked in restaurants, but I had no idea what it takes to get your product onto retail shelves. And it is an entire world of its own. And so I listen to a lot of podcasts that go deep on this. So Startup Confidential is one I highly recommend for any entrepreneur who is in the CPG space. He talks about how you can grow your brand to, 7 figures, and but do it smartly. I think, again, I came from software and I came from Hootsuite. I mean, that was a unicorn, right? And CPG it's you're shipping products. It's not the same thing. I mean, that's so obvious, but I think it's a good. It's good to bring an entrepreneur back to reality, which sometimes we need, and shares so many great stories around other brands we've all heard of, that make it very relatable and very practical. So that's a really good one. And the author of that, or the host of that podcast, I should say, also has a book called Ramping Your Brand. And it's called How to Ride the Killer CPG Growth Curve. That's also an excellent, and just a little bit, same sort of thing, but just maybe a bit more in depth. Another really great one by a woman, her name's Allison Ball. Her podcast is called Food Biz Wiz. And she talks, it's very broad and talks about distributors and brokers and selling to retail buyers and, the to-dos and the not to-dos. So again, as somebody who, knew nothing about consumer packaged goods, it's a really good primer. And then I guess in terms of books or maybe stuff that's not so related to CPG, I guess one book that I like to recommend to folks is a biography by a woman, Alexandra Morton, who's quite famous she's from BC and has been an activist fighting on behalf of our wild salmon. And it's called Not on My Watch. And she talks about the atrocities of fish farms on the BC West Coast. And it is, I'm born in BC, I've lived in BC my whole life, and I didn't know a lot of this. It was incredibly eye-opening and very educational and infuriating, but kind of drives me even more and shows the importance of why seafood alternatives are so important.
Every time we have somebody on Veg Network Canada and they share this question, when they share the resources, it's always amazing because there's always at least one or two that we've never heard of. I can probably speak for the rest of the group, at least myself. I don't think I've heard of all 3 of the ones that you mentioned. And so just really, really valuable to open people up to different tools and resources that will help. And so thank you so much for sharing that. Our second to last question for you is coming from the lens of maybe it's a local company where you're from on Vancouver Island in British Columbia, or maybe it's a country in across the world. Doesn't matter. But the next question is, what are some companies that Save to See looks to for inspiration?
Yeah, so I just, again, having just come back from Expo West, the brands were just out of this world. I mean, you would ask me about trends that I was seeing in my industry. And so even though I already spoke to the trends in my industry, some other trends that are a bit broader than plant-based seafood and more relevant to, snacks and beverages is like everything, like take something and add functional ingredients, whether it's adaptogens. And so every chip, every chocolate bar, every water had, 3 or 4 functional ingredients that I'd never heard of before that, but presumably do something for your body health, brain health. So there, yeah, oh my goodness, there are a lot of really cool brands that I met, but I guess some that come to mind, I met this really cool company there called Stockel Dreamery. They're a cheese company out of Sweden. He was sampling his cream cheese. And so naturally I had it with our salmon, and it was just the creamiest and better than cream cheese. I mean, there's a lot of really great cream cheeses out there, but this was kind of mind blowing. Oatly was also at the show. They had a massive booth. I mean, their branding, I'm such a huge fan of everything they do. All their campaigns are so clever. Their je ne sais quoi, their attitude, their voice is so them. I don't know, I aspire for one day, Save the Sea, to find the voice that works for them, right? It takes time, and we're still a young company, and so but companies like Oatly, I take a lot of inspiration from. Another Canadian brand that was also at the show, but I have been an admirer of for a long time, is Midday Squares. I feel like everybody talks about them. They've, again, the entrepreneurs are the brand, right? Like that is this, that's just, it's this, their personalities, like in their booth and their packaging and everything they do. And so they had a great presence and a great product. Let's be honest. And then I guess, I would be remiss if I didn't, mention all the amazing plant-based Vancouver brands that I stand on the shoulders of, and that continue to support us as we, are still, finding our way. Juice Truck, Aaron Ireland, Mila, Planted, all of these, these early folks in plant-based who have been doing the hard work of increasing awareness of the importance of plant-based and providing a space for plant-based entrepreneurs to, share their product and get advice. So yeah, I think that they are, these international brands are sexy and they're awesome, but we have a really healthy and tight plant-based community in Vancouver that I'm very grateful for. And I say Vancouver, Victoria, I kind of mean BC when I say that.
What a list of inspiration, that's for sure. And the amount of Canadian representation that was in Anaheim at Expo West was absolutely incredible. So just, more and more moving forward. Okay, it feels like we just started talking, but we're already at our last question. Time flies when you're having fun, as they say. So this question is, we can appreciate how different founders are at different stages. Maybe they just went from being an entrepreneur to an entrepreneur, or maybe they're in the middle of their journey, or maybe they're looking at an exit, whether that's like a sale or going public, or so anywhere along that spectrum. Feel free to speak to this question. And again, no right or wrong answers. If being modest is your style, that's totally fine as well. Our last question for you, Aki, today is, what is some advice that you have for business owners and entrepreneurs?
Yeah, so I just turned 43. I turned like a week ago. And as I mentioned, I'd always wanted to be an entrepreneur. And working in tech, everybody was really young. There's always these top 20 under 20, top 30 under 30, top 40 under 40. And it was always a dream of mine to be on one of these lists. And now I'm like, oh my God, I'm too old. Like I missed my chance. And so I didn't start my business until, I was almost 40. And I guess my advice to older entrepreneurs and younger too, it's never too late. And I think what I lack for in youth, I more than make up for in experience and wisdom and network that has served me so well. And so even though it took me, 20 years to finally, make the leap into entrepreneurship, everything leading up to there has served me today.
Beautiful, beautiful. So you heard it, folks. Aki's advice is similar to the ancient Chinese proverb. The best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago. The second best time is now. And so it's never too late just to get started and make that shift if that's what you're after. So, all right. Value-packed conversation, Aki. Before we outro you and let people know where they can drool and salivate away by checking out Save the Sea online and on Instagram, is there anything in the conversation that came up for you or anything that you'd like to mention? Maybe something upcoming, I don't know. Anything, the floor is yours.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, we just literally, 2 weeks ago launched 2 new products. We launched a line extension of our smoked salmon, which is a ready-to-eat version with dill and capers. And then we also launched a tuna salad made from jackfruit. So these are on shelves in select natural retailers across the country. So please try it, take photos of it, tag us at Save the Sea. We'd love to hear your thoughts.
All right, folks. Well, start the car, get out and grab those products, and amazing products to share with friends and family as well too. And when the weather starts getting better for a lot of us here, perfect type of food that you can take for that barbecue or that picnic. So thank you so much, Aki. And like we mentioned, everybody, you can find out more online, www.savedasea.com, just how it sounds, savedasea.com. And the same on Instagram at Save the Sea. Aki, we are very, very appreciative and grateful of your time today. We know that you're very, not busy, very productive in growing your brand and your business. We thank you for your time, and everybody else will catch you on another episode of Veg Networking Canada. Take care.
Thank you.